Major funding for these programs is provided by HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Greenberg Traurig LP, the Moynihan Group. Additional funding is provided by Antares Real Estate, Arbor Realty Trust, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Fremont Investment and Loan, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Must Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal Inc., Swig Equities, the Engel Berman Group, Titan Capital, the Wickoff Group, YL Real Estate Developers, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller, host of the Stoller Report. 125,000 homes have been built because of 421A legislation since 1971. And now, the wonderful administration and everybody wants to get rid of this. Okay, why do they want to get rid of it? Now, every time you see an ad in the newspaper, it says, apartment for sale, 421A tax credit. What's this effect? What's going to happen? So today I have a developer who's a capitalist who wants to develop for himself. I have a developer who works for a nonprofit. And then I have the attorney who works with the legislation, who will tell us a little bit about it. My guests today include Alan Bell, principal of the Hudson Companies, Adam Weinstein, president and CEO of Phipps Houses, and last but not least, Ross Moskowitz, partner at Strzok and Levan. Been involved with this legislation. You and your organization have worked with Rebney. What's happening now with this 421A? But more important than saying what's happening for the 421A, tell my audience, as opposed to me being so volatile on the subject, what does the 421A program really do for the consumer?
Well, current status is as follows. Legislation last year enacted by the City Council and by the Mayor as of December 28th goes into effect.
Okay,
gradually changes.
Russ, I would really like you to pose more, or Alan or anyone, to say, what is the 421A?
421A is a tax exemption program. It gives a benefit to the owner and sometimes gets passed on if it's a condo. It basically is a tax exemption over a period of time, anywhere from 10, 15, or 25 years. And it is an exemption on the increase in the assessed value based upon the improvement.
And why was this created? Why was it created in 1971? Why was it amended in 1987?
Well, it was created to spur on any kind of development, whether it's market rate, affordable housing, or what have you. In '85, there was a change, created what's known as a geographic exclusion area. And that limited, for the most part, in prime Manhattan areas, the benefit. And the benefit would only be allowed to accrue to a market rate in Midtown Manhattan, for instance, if affordable housing was either built on-site, or, as Adam would know, or off-site housing was built pursuant to some kind of agreement with the city. Bottom line is was to also incur and to accrue affordable housing. Right now, though, legislation...
And a lot of units were created. A lot of housing
since
units...
1985, and Alan can speak better to this, since 1985, in terms of market rate housing, no market rate housing was built without the 421A program.
And I think it's important also to think about this issue of why this was created, and to think about the current changes that are being proposed in trying to answer the question, why now, and what is the government trying to accomplish by making these changes. You know, if you think back the last 10, 15 years, what New York City looked like 15 years ago, where, you know, vast parts of our city were places where people did not want to go. I used to develop projects where you'd have to have armed guards to protect my projects. It was a very different city 15 years ago. And I'm afraid the pendulum is swinging back so much against development without really people thinking about all the positive things that have happened because of so much development and how that's changed not only the physical fabric of the city, but even the psychology and crime in the city. city.
But look,
And-
let's look at
and
this
I think-
development. I mean,
yeah.
this development. You know, we didn't have development in Williamsburg. I mean, we didn't have development in East Harlem. I mean, this has been spurred over the, as you said, people. There wasn't housing being built. I mean, even
Yeah,
with
but
you.
the 421A legislation was irrelevant to that creation. You're missing the point, guys. The program was
of
created
course.
in '71. Well, it is the real estate equivalent of the McLaughlin Group.
I
So
agree.
let's get going. The program was created in the '70s and the mid '80s at the absolute nadir of two real estate cycles. And it was meant to spur the as of right program. Let's distinguish between the as of right and the certificate program. The certificate program being the one
Let's
that
get
generates
as of right.
affordable
Okay,
housing.
let's get to that.
I won't claim to be an expert on the as of right program. I never use it. But the as of right program was meant to spur market rate development, nothing else. And Alan is partly correct. It helped do so. We are now at the absolute zenith of the real estate cycle. Is it really appropriate? Is it appropriate?
1987, they changed it. Half the world started building new houses. All these cranes came up.
Plain and simple. Does the taxpayer in the city of New York, leaving aside some of the problems with New York's real property tax law, and I'm not going to speak about the whole property tax law.
Well, we'll have to get into that because you can't avoid that.
Of course we will. But
Okay.
is giving a tax break within areas not just outside the existing geographic exclusion zone appropriate? I would argue absolutely not. And no one sitting here would disagree with me.
Prior to the show, we brought into a discussion of certain properties in Manhattan. We spoke about some luxury apartments, condominium units, which have received the 421A. They have received them because of the negotiable certificate program. And we did say, I even said, you know what? These people really didn't need the certificate program. These people would buy an apartment no matter what. It didn't matter if they had a tax abatement. It helped, but they would buy an apartment no matter what. Now, you just finished the development, a magnificent development in Brooklyn called J Condo. How many units were there?
267.
267. Now, someone was able, if they bought a unit in that building, they have no taxes right now for 10 years?
They have a modest tax, the tax that
$40 a month?
existed before.
$40 a month, let's say.
Okay.
And if they didn't have the 421A, what would the taxes be?
Something on the order of, let's say, $800 a month.
Fine. So let's say it's a difference of $750 a month, which is $9,000 a year. When somebody is buying an apartment, they look at what my mortgage is and what my taxes are. And if I have another $750, it has to come from somewhere. It's going to come, they can't pay the price. These people wouldn't have bought these units at that price.
Well, they would have bought at that price. They certainly is the key thing. And I want to go back to what you said at the zenith, because that's exactly the point. What I think is happening, unfortunately, is that our leadership is caught up in sort of the irrational exuberance of today's real estate marketplace, and is ignoring the fact that we live in a market economy with cycles. We always have cycles. We always will have cycles. And the government tends to make these decisions at exactly the worst point in time, because things are booming now. We have the notion that everything is going to continue to boom.
Oh, please.
It doesn't go.
No, come on, let Ross say it.
Don't Cassandra me.
Why?
The absolute right time to make this decision. Who knows whether we're at the zenith? You cannot predict where the curve is going.
You have your words. Zenith.
I'm saying we are at
You actually use
zenith.
nadir.
Okay.
Zenith is good too.
Right. That's right. Nadir and zenith. I like nautical terms.
Okay.
It is impossible to figure out where we are in that. But
that's
the exact
exactly
wrong time would have been in 1985 and 71 to roll back tax exemptions. That's the wrong time.
But you're missing the point here.
Do it on the upslope.
Forget about it. But Alan hits on the market, okay? But take the market out of it. Let's look at the numbers. 40% of the city's budget is based upon real property taxes. Okay? Less than 35% is based on the overall budget. So, I mean, this is driving the city's economy. I say, what does it matter? Why get rid of it? If it's spurring on development, even the worst case example, use 15 Central Park West. I'm not at all advocating that should have gotten benefits. But so what? It got benefits. The construction, the transfer taxes and the like, it just keeps spurring the economy. If 40% of the city's budget is on real property taxes, why does it matter? Why does it matter? And I'll take it a step further.
I'll tell you
what
why.
makes you think
I'll tell you why.
no, hang on. If you take away the 421A for some of the market rate development, Why do you think that's going to help affordable housing? I see that being totally on the opposite end. I see developers like him saying, you know what? We're not going to build on site. We're not going to build, so we won't get the 421A. Even if you argue that the 421A is not worth it to him, he's not going to build on-site affordable. I think the whole point of the 421A, to create this new, extend the exclusion zone, to require on-site affordable housing, it's not going to happen. I suggest it was not going to happen, and the actual objective of what this is intended to do is not going to happen.
Well, I mean, now you're sort of moving into the new legislation, and I do have my bones to pick with that. But with respect to the fueling of New York's economy based on, New York's governmental economy based on real estate taxes, if one exempts the property from real estate tax, you've effectively forgone the revenue benefit that you've seen.
Look at the other revenue, the transfer tax. And
the transfer tax benefit is a volatility benefit. And frankly, you guys are crazy. If you want to talk about irrational exuberance, that will disappear tomorrow. Real estate taxes are the base. Transfer taxes, transaction taxes are not.
Yeah, but Adam,
that is really that is a silly.
What about mortgage recording taxes?
Right.
What about all this when you're creating
Michael,
this?
Those are moments. Those are moments. When things are flush, when things are happening, when transactions are happening, you can't base a municipal economy, a fiscal policy, based on transaction taxes. Real estate taxes, quite the contrary, are the thing upon which all municipalities base in this country.
But these buildings eventually will trend into paying the real estate taxes. Wait, and I really want to.
I grant you that.
And they will, and you'll have that base, and that base will grow over time. And let's sit back a second. I mean, New York City still has some serious economic issues as to what its future economic base is going to be. And whether you like it or not, real estate development is not just a provider of a service, a product at the end. It has become a major force in the city's economy. And for this city to be this world economy, this world city, this has to continue to go. And a lot of the people that live in the neighborhoods and occupy the units that you produce are people that make their living in construction, union and non-union, and in services related to real estate development in terms of supporting those buildings, working in those buildings. And the worst thing that could happen for the city is to truncate this kind of development that has helped to build this economy and transform our neighborhoods. This is a major part of our economy.
It is a major part. It is not the major thing that drives New York City.
It's a huge part
of it.
If you
and
look
the
at
$2 billion, $3 billion surplus.
Go on.
Services. You know, hedge funds.
Talk about transitional. Talk about what could go up and down.
But it's what you just asked. What drives New York's economy?
So the prongs that drive it are. We used to have a much more stable economy.
Every other municipality in this country bases its tax base
and has tremendous
not on transactional, not on sales tax revenue, not on real estate tax related revenue, not on these bizarre little taxes that we all have.
Let's get back to the real estate subject as opposed to the tax subject.
Can we talk about affordable housing?
Let's get to affordable housing. Okay, let's get to affordable housing. Do you think these houses, all these apartments in the Bronx, will be built if these developers cannot sell their negotiable certificates?
Do you want to? Can we get to the negotiable certificates?
Yeah, let's get to the negotiable certificates. Jackson Development, Atlantic Development, the Arca Group, all these guys will not build over there unless they're able to sell and get a benefit.
Well, I think that as an affordable...
So 4,000 units in the Bronx will be gone. Apartments in Brooklyn will be gone. So tell me, come on.
Is there any oxygen left in the room? As an affordable housing program, I think I would, as I said earlier, I'm not an expert on the As of Right program. I think it has served a purpose for sure, and I'll grant all of you that. As an affordable housing production program, the 421A program has been a miraculous failure, and I don't think anyone on the task force, from the REBNY representatives to the affordable housing advocates, and remember, I'm not an advocate, I'm a producer. We're in favor of continuing the certificate program. And the reason is, Michael, primarily the reason is that you were, at any point during the cycle of the past bunch of years, something that is worth $51,000 present value, just pick, maybe that's $47,000, maybe it's $60,000, was sold for $12,000 to $20,000. And that is really a bad deal for the taxpayer. You could argue with me, and I'd grant you, will government take what was $12,000 of value and turn it into $25,000 in direct subsidy to developers? Yeah, I think they will. I'm hoping, praying, and casting my vote, really, that New York City's municipal government will continue to acknowledge the problem in housing the very people that I house and that you have in various points in your career, and that Ross provides legal counsel to with a variety of organizations. Because it will still be efficient for the government to do so.
But you know, let's get to the serious point. I would say to you that land values, specifically in areas which will be excluded under the proposed plan, have been being reduced. In Brooklyn, where you do a lot of development, is it a bad thing? I think Alan's partner, David Kramer, once said to me for one of my articles, he said, if a guy owns a garage today and he's getting his cars parked over there, and if he expected to get $150 per FAR and he's only going to get $100, he'd rather keep the property as a garage and make his revenue. He doesn't have to sell it to a developer who's a client of Ross or a developer like you and build housing, because it doesn't benefit him. So a lot of properties which were one time worth $200 a developable foot, I'm not talking about Manhattan, I'm talking about exclusionary zone, I'm talking up in Harlem, all these other areas, these properties are going down. Now, true, some of these owners have had windfalls, okay, that the properties weren't worth this, and these people, oh, my property was worth that. Tillery Street, Myrtle Avenue, and all the rest. But I will tell you that I have had on my show a couple weeks ago a bunch of young developers, and I passed there was a building called the Ivy on 118th Street and 2nd Avenue, and he said if he didn't have the 421A to provide his purchaser, his purchasers wouldn't have moved in to a condominium development for $700 a foot on 118th Street. And I think that's going to happen because people, as I just tried to explain before, when they have a $40 a month tax bill or a $750 a month tax bill, you know, it's going to have an effect. So land prices are going to go down. I think construction in the outer boroughs is going to go down. Developers aren't going to want to do it. And I think a lot of Ross's clients are going to be up. You know, you have both sides, developers and nonprofits. Sure. So,
well, I totally disagree, but I'll let someone else talk.
I'll let Ross talk, and then I want to hear why you totally disagree.
What I want to know is, when did real estate development become a four-letter word? I want to know, all of a sudden, there's this continuing pounding on the real estate development, and it goes back to the discussion we had before. You're a real estate, you're a producer, you're a developer.
I am.
There are a lot of not-for-profits
That's right.
who are developers. And I just go back to this legislation, which, by the way, has competing legislation now, both in the Assembly and the Senate, and if they don't get their act together, at the end of this year, there's actually not going to be a 421A program.
But we did say prior, they'll get their act together. I mean,
let's assume they get their act together. The point is, though, the competing bills right now, the Assembly bill expands the exclusion zone from what the mayor and the council did last year. Expands it to everywhere, you know, and every possible place, up and down the Queens waterfront, downtown Brooklyn, areas in Bushwick.
you know, I think what you just said, you know, I have friends who want to develop in Coney Island today. And if they cannot have a 421A or a tax abatement, they don't believe that they would be able to build in Coney Island. And I rode through Coney Island recently. It's vacant. I mean, there's nothing going on there with the exception of a number of projects, city projects which have been failures. But that's a problem. Now, Josh Muss wouldn't have built Oceana unless he had a tax abatement. There are properties in Harlem that wouldn't have been built without the tax abatement.
Oh, look, I don't think anyone is contemplating, really, you know.
But I think the zone is what he's saying. No, I think it's the zone is the bigger problem.
There will not be. I'll make a prediction. I'll go out on a limb here to say that there will be an extender. There'll be some form of extender legislation, whatever it may be.
We can agree to that.
You know, I think the premise that every time this subject comes up, you go to a piece of anecdotal evidence, and that piece of anecdotal evidence is a J condo or something on 118th Street. And the fact is that Alan Bell won't stop developing real estate, and Ross's clients won't stop developing real estate because of a tweak in what really amounts to a tweak in the 421A legislation. There are certainly parts of it that I think are challenging, difficult. It isn't that people won't stop. In real estate development, all evidence to the contrary is not a four-letter word for the past 7 years, 10 years in New York City. In fact, quite the opposite. It's been the the bon mot on
Even though
everyone's
you're
lips.
young, but
just
you
said
do
bon mot.
remember, you do remember the 80s when there was difficult times in the real estate market.
I do.
And
But
you know, nothing,
different
the
factors,
cycle is the longest we've had for
That's right.
many years.
Good-
and things can
Good
change.
cycle. Time to listen, but you know, back to the earlier point. When a better time? When is there a better time than to skim some cream, which is really what the program ends up doing, than when this program has when real estate values have gone up markedly. If Alan will disclose his profit on the J condo or what he paid for the land, then I'll grant you your point about $800 or $700 a month in taxes. But he won't, because it will be reflected in land values. Alan wouldn't go out and buy that parcel in Williamsburg. He'll go a little further. He'll go into Bushwick, or because he's a resourceful guy.
Right, but
Yeah,
he
As
does
are
that-
all of
but
Ross's
the
clients.
implication is always that
And furthermore, the
well,
effect on affordable
yeah.
housing is that I can't afford to buy land in the Bronx. That's not a good thing. Talk about irrational exuberance. It's all reflected ultimately in cap rates.
So you can't buy land.
What's
you
the
just
biggest
said.
irrational exuberance in real estate right now, guys? What's the biggest? Land prices.
No question about that.
So what's
Absolutely.
so great about $700 a foot in Manhattan? Not so great.
But you also act like everything will find its level in a costless way,
No.
and indeed there are communities, there are places where things cost too much and taxes are too high. Long Island is plagued by the fact that taxes are too high and they can't build any housing.
Yep.
So you can't act like it just all finds its level. Land prices will go down to the right level and everybody will just go about their business. And it's not true. I just looked at a job in the new exclusion area. I walked away. It doesn't work. It doesn't pencil out.
You
at
know,
full
Adam, I
Let me-
also would like to give you a specific. Let's take the ocean, okay? Coney Island's on the ocean, Rockaway's on the ocean, and Long Beach is on the ocean. Now, if you do something in Rockaway or Coney Island today, you can have a tax abatement. If you go to, which I think I'm specifically what Alan just said, if you go to Long Beach, a person who's building a condominium development, the taxes are $1,000 a month. So what has happened is the developments in Long Beach have been limited because people had this problem. It wasn't the question of the land. It was the question of how much somebody could afford per month. And it's been very difficult for all of the developments in Long Beach because of this tax.
But take two other points. First, just finish that. You have Arvin by the Sea and Arvin East. All right, two projects that are, one is just started construction, one is not under construction. They've negotiated, you guys know these, they've negotiated with the city for pricing, right? Their pricing reflects a 421A. Some of those projects are not going to be eligible for 421A because they're not going to get into the ground in time, okay? And then I would turn to you. I would suggest, even if you get rid of the 421A program, and if you look at what the bond activity cap is now, there's less and less bonds available. So even if you wanted to do on-site an 80-20 job, you're not going to have the ability to get the bond capacity you need.
Right.
But let me just add a third point. What's going to happen, and we could sit here 5 years from now, is there's going to be other subsidies that are going to be created to help make that deal work. An 80-20 job now in an exclusion area that doesn't get a 421A.
Guys,
doesn't have
you remember, we're doing a little too much inside baseball.
Okay.
80-20 means that there's 20% affordable. I want
Well, Ross,
my point
Ross
is,
underscores
what I'm
a
trying
big-
to say,
big unintended consequence.
For
But
my
my-
audience is I want them to say, I'm trying to get for the audience, which is the general consumer who's watching CUNY TV or is watching WEGT in Montauk, to understand that these tax abatements are very important for developers.
not only
because
very important, but what I'm suggesting is the government's intention here is to take these incentives away. The government's intention is also the bond activity, which allows taxes and financing for some of these projects, is also being reduced. What I'm saying is that we look back...
Constrained, not reduced.
Constrained, fair
It's
point.
actually being increased.
In certain areas.
Okay.
Bottom line is, if we were four of us to sit down 5 years from now, I would suggest that we'd be looking at other subsidies that are now being brought up into the marketplace, either by the feds or the states or the local, and that these subsidies that are being taken away now or being constrained or reduced, there's going to be other mechanisms that are going to come into place because they're going to find that these type of projects can't get built without something.
And that's probably a good thing. And let me tell you where I start. I start from a base of zero land cost. And the city houses 1 million people, 1 million households, maybe more, for whom a zero land cost plus the cost of construction cannot be borne by the rent or purchase price that they pay. And that's the proper way to start this. Start with a zero land cost and work your way up, and then determine the degree to which the government wants to subsidize, in effect, the purchase price of land.
Alan?
Okay, one problem though. You mentioned the word creaming before. This is a good time to cream it. And you put a gloss of equity onto this whole issue, as if these subsidies are somehow being given away. We can't really talk about 421A until we talk a little bit about the city's taxing policy, because it really ultimately all comes from that. And you want to talk about creaming, then talk about the way the city taxes my building on Central Park West, co-op and condo projects that are way below what they should be taxed, and those are the people that are not paying their fair share. You want to talk about equity.
Single-family homes too.
And because of that, the city historically has overburdened new development. You can talk to anybody, you can talk to the finance commissioner. This is simply true. It's true by legislation. And because of that, over the years, it has shut down development. And the thing about 421A, it corrected for a political decision that was made to under-assess luxury co-op and condo units throughout Manhattan. That is a fact. And unless you understand that, you can't understand why 421A is important.
But I think the question, okay, we can be debating this for hours and hours. I think the real question is, I'm looking at it in this way. I think in certain parts of the city, it is really very important to have some type of tax abatement to build in certain markets. Prime midtown locations, I don't think it's going to have an effect. Those consumers, I wouldn't want to pay it, but people will be continuing to buy apartments because apartments are still selling in Long Beach. That I just gave you an example. They're selling at a slower pace. But I'm saying, I think we can't kill something immediately. I think you have to phase into certain situations. I think you can't. Right now, all I see are cranes going into the city. Everybody's putting their foundation in. I got to get there before December 27th. I better be in there before December 27th. What's going to happen next year? All these contractors, there won't be any superstructure guys. They'll be unemployed. They'll be going to Ireland to find a new job.
Look, I'm not a government official, but I think the government's policy here has been one to encourage a more balanced development throughout New York City. And that if we're going to have a vital, vibrant city in 2030, that's important, not just crowding as many units as possible as you can into the geographic exclusion zone. Furthermore, the government needs to be able to supply housing for people for whom there isn't an opportunity.
Okay.
Or transit-oriented development in ring suburbs.
And I would say about that,
Alan, you have 10 seconds.
421A, if you really want to create affordable housing, there should be a floor area bonus. Give somebody who is going to buy a site and they want 20% affordable housing.
Bring us back for the inclusionary show.
Okay.
Give us a floor area bonus. Why not use the private sector to create affordable housing?
Very much better idea.
Wonderful idea. Now, I think my audience will really get a lot out of this. We will come back in the fall when the new season of the Stoller Report, and we're going to continue our 421A, and we'll even talk about inclusionary. I'd like to thank Alan Bell, principal of the Hudson Companies, Adam Weinstein, president and CEO of Phipps Housing, and last but not least, Ross Moskowitz, partner at Strzok and Levon, for being here. Next week, we're going to talk about the crazy, crazy office market and what effect it's having on hurting small companies who can't stay in New York City. See you next week.
Major funding for these programs is provided by HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Greenberg Traurig LP, the Moynihan Group. Additional funding is provided by Antares Real Estate, Arbor Realty Trust, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Fremont Investment and Loan, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Musk Development, LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal Inc., Swig Equities, the Engel-Berman Group, Titan Capital, the Wickoff Group, YL Real Estate Developers, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.